The great pleasure now to introduce our next guest, Peter Saville. Peter. You choose. Right.
Hello. Very close. Okay.
Maybe we've got to change cassettes. To begin, actually, we wanted to ask you about the city, as this marathon is first part of a London marathon. And we've discussed in previous discussions we've had in Manchester a lot about this notion of the future of the city. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you see
the future of the city. Yeah. I find it difficult to imagine the future of London. I've been finding London very difficult this last few years, almost like it's reached to some kind of optimum point. One of the things that helped me kind of approach the Manchester project was the fact that, you know, I kind of feel that London has almost sort of passed this optimum point, and that, you know, the UK could really do with another city, not even a second city, just another city, you know, a kind of comparable city, and that London is almost reaching a point where it's not rewarding to people now unless they earn a lot of money and have a lot of kind of luxuries and privileges. And it is strange that the UK doesn't have a really strong other city. There's such a kind of gap between London and all of the other cities. So, you know, I have a certain amount of kind of optimism for places which still have some development in them.
I have a totally different question.
Okay, good.
You're a graphic designer, among other things,
yes.
Probably, like most of us. But my theory is that graphic design is the most important and most powerful domain in the world right now.
It is.
Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
And since when do you think it is the case, and how much longer do you think it will last?
I mean,
and why do you think it is so particularly important right now?
Because, I mean, I'm trying to kind of, well, I feel kind of retired from it, partly for that reason. It's just that it happens to be what I learned at college, you know, and the decision was made, I think, at the age of 16, when an art teacher said to myself and my friend Malcolm Garrett, you boys should consider doing graphic design. And we said, what's that? And he explained that there was a real job doing what we liked doing at school, so we just decided we would do that. So I trained as a graphic designer. There's been many times when I thought that, you know, I really should have done something else. But anyway, that's, you know, kind of where I started out. But I've always done it for myself. I've always tried to be in a position where I was expressing my own point of view, and that is very uncharacteristic for the graphic designer. It's really, it's for others and to others. There's a great misapprehension about graphics at the moment that it's something to do with self-expression, and of course it isn't. You're a messenger for someone else. But in a kind of, in a media-dominated society, in a kind of information society, the messages that you are communicating are the things that people know. So I have a vision of the world at the moment with a kind of net around it, and that's a sort of news net. And you kind of, it's your existence in that news net that gives you a presence in the world. And of course, because the communication arts broker the news net, they're very powerful. Of course, though, the problem is that the people in charge of those messages, well, the designers, graphic designers, are merely articulating other people's messages. Graphic design is not your own message. It's somebody else's message. And the communications designers are the ones whose responsibility it is to most precisely deliver somebody else's agenda, which of course actually doesn't usually interest me very often. Obviously, if it's someone's agenda which I feel in agreement with and have some feeling for, then it's kind of quite nice to be involved. But more often than not, your client's agenda is not necessarily your own interest or even your own agreement. And pretty much that's why I've kind of retired as much as possible from doing it. I'm not very interested in articulating other people's messages.
But what is interesting also in relation to that is that you spoke actually recently about sort of a fatigue of sort of fashion and consumerism. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this. I mean, you've resisted this idea of a corporate office. Many of your colleagues started to grow and grow and grow and having sort of big corporate design offices. You kept the structure very small.
Okay, one bit at a time. A large design office, and Rem will know this, is the first step towards realizing the level to which you're in business, because suddenly you're in a business yourself. Suddenly you find that you're doing work for the purposes of, paying salaries and covering overheads. So you're not working on things that you care about, you're working on cash flow. So that's, so suddenly that introduces you to actually the reality of what you're engaged in. And my feeling about most of the kind of popular arts is that the issues that were there that they challenged are issues which have been, for the most part, accomplished. So pop, pop is the culture of the kind of post-war period and the period of post-war democratization. And pop, for the most part, whether it was in the form of music or design or fashion, pop articulated the needs and desires of a new generation and a democratized generation. And for the most part, the things that it had to challenge have now been challenged. So, fashion isn't really doing what it did 20 or 30 years ago. Pop music isn't doing what it did 30 and 40 years ago. It's pretty much run its course and become a commodity, and an entirely commoditized activity. So it's almost like it's almost like pop culture is in a kind of condition of auto-repeat, like a tape going round. It's also fairly limited. It's a fairly limited palette within pop. There's, obviously there's issues for people. There's more marginal issues for more marginal areas of society, for people in other countries and other cultures. And there's something maybe vital that can inform a marginal area of pop, but in the kind of general bigger sphere, pretty much it's run its course, in my opinion.
Basically, we did research. And for the research, we got kind of synopsis based on CVs, etc., etc. And there is a kind of sentence about what you're doing now, which is kind of really alarming and seemingly completely wrong and offensive. If I hear what you're saying, because it describes you. He now concentrates on his own creative projects, consulting for corporate clients, including CNN, Givenchy, Gucci, and Selfridges, on branding and identity issues and the development of fashion multimedia.
Okay, well that's that's the internet for you. How to resolve these two worlds?
Where's
that from?
I don't know. It's kind of here.
Is it the biography?
Like knowing the kind of similar situations.
So it is the biography from, I would say, 2002. In fact, 2002. So in 2002, that's some of the things that I was doing.
Yeah.
So it's 4 years ago.
So then something changed.
A lot has changed.
Yeah. But what is interesting is that you told me the other day that actually...
But let's talk about what changed, because you went from kind of graphic design to branding for a moment.
No, I mean branding. What is branding? Everything seems to be branding these days.
Yeah.
Branding to me now is how you exist in that newsnet. A brand, how I understand. I mean, a lot of people ask me about this topic. The work in Manchester started as a branding project, and I have to think.
And now it is.
I have to think about this. Like, what do we mean by branding? Now, brand used to be like a logo. Your mother would tell you, drink this or buy that. It's a good brand. I mean, I think about this occasionally. Driving the car on the way home from Manchester to London, I think about this kind of thing. A brand, my personal understanding of a brand now is what it is that lives in that news net, that net around the world, the kind of capsule of information that lives in the net. And obviously it has to be news, and it has to be constantly regenerating and entertaining. So a brand now is something which is in a kind of a process of constant regeneration, basically just continually looking for news. And actually, unless you are continuously generating news, you drop out of the news net. So I see a brand now, I mean, what is a brand? It's actually like a virtual entity, a brand. A brand is not a logo. And a brand is not necessarily a company or an activity. It's a kind of, it's a sum of its parts. It's a sort of an entity. And it seems to me that these entities need to continuously regenerate now. And so basically I see a brand as, in a way, a kind of a news generator. I get asked to consult or to give an opinion about these things. What I try to do is what I've always done, which is give my own opinion about these things. It's my starting point.
Can you give an example among this list?
Yeah, CNN is on that list. In, I think, 2000 or 2001, a friend, a client from the 80s, had moved to CNN. And and they had some problems at CNN Domestic in the US. And David Newman invited me over to talk to his chief executives about design, about the image. He felt that, it was obvious. CNN had been founded by some journalists who did their job, fairly well, but they were a group of guys who were not that sort of sensitive or concerned about the look of things. So David asked me to go over for a couple of days and talk to them about the look of things, to try to articulate to them why the look of things mattered these days. That's it. So I consulted on the look of things. Yeah. And, CNN, we'll all have a whole bunch of different opinions about CNN. It's not an entirely bad thing. No. So I didn't have it. And it was very interesting. I went to Atlanta. I got to look inside, a world news network.
And did your work have an effect? Did they change anything?
I think so. They employed then some designers to redesign the look of CNN.
The studio.
No, the on-screen.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Yeah. What the thing that you'll know this from your own work. The thing that's interesting when we go to clients, when there's a commission, we have to enter a little bit into their world. You're doing a building for somebody, whether it's a hospital or it's a hotel or it's a factory, and you enter into a little bit their world, and you learn something. And I find it interesting to learn things by these introductions to another world. I learned about fashion from the inside. As a young person, I was kind of fascinated by fashion. I was fascinated by the music business. It was very interesting to see it from the inside. My experience in Manchester has taken me inside local government, inside politics. That's a very kind of eye-opening experience.
I wanted to know more about this Manchester experience.
Yeah, okay.
This is a very interesting situation, actually, that you've been asked to kind of rebrand Manchester.
Well, they asked me to rebrand Manchester.
And I was very curious how you sort of answered to that, because I think one of the things...
But let's establish first, what did they ask you? And what are you doing?
Hans is right. This term it wasn't to rebrand Manchester, it was to kind of consult or to guide the brand of Manchester, or what do we do with it? It has a certain kind of status. They wanted this to optimize the status. As I said, I have to go about these things in a tangible way that means something to me. Because I didn't build a big business, as we said, I didn't let a big studio develop around me. Every time it happened, it, fell apart for one reason or another. I'm not duty-bound to generate business. So I address these problems on a kind of level that it means something to me. And Manchester is my home city, so I kind of felt a certain obligation, a certain responsibility, a certain pride to be asked, but also a certain duty. It was a bit like national service. And I owed a lot to Manchester. All I did was I said to myself, okay, how can the future of Manchester be better? That's how I went about the job. And it's a fairly complex issue because the cities are complex things. But, 2 years ago, that was the question I put in my own mind, and that's the question I still have in my mind. How can Manchester evolve in a positive way in Europe in the 21st century from my own point of view?
Yeah. And?
How?
Yeah.
Okay, well, the next step was I had to make some kind of assumptions about what I felt would happen in Europe this century.
Yeah.
Obviously, what would survive in that, Manchester is an example of a, industrial city, which is now a post-industrial city. And that obviously so much of what had been the raison d'etre of European cities has now changed. The making of things has gone to the other side of the world. But the what to make has not yet gone to the other side of the world. But my understanding of things is that, in a way, the intelligence culture of the world still resides in the West. So there's the financial management services, we are still here, and I think also, to a certain extent, a kind of creative and cultural direction is still a remit of the West, I think. So I felt that a city such as Manchester had to have a place in that new industrial culture, and to be proactive in the kind of creative, cultural, urban issues, and that it could demonstrate some sort of progressive ideas and some progressive thinking about the kind of the urban condition this century. I thought, it was one of the nice things about smaller cities is that they're quite empowering. Very large megacities can be rather overwhelming to people. Smaller cities do give you a feeling that something is possible, that you might tackle something in a new way. And this was, in a way, my recommendations to the city, that you to go about the future and to go about your contemporary problems in actually in an innovative way, and thereby hopefully set some kind of example to other places. I mean, I can go into it a bit more. Manchester was the first industrial city. That was the kind of provenance of the place. Right. And I re-articulated that as the original modern city. Mm-hmm. I sat with them and said, look, it's the first industrial city, as you know. It's a great provenance, but it doesn't really give you a route forward. It's so, historically kind of facing. But we could look at first industrial, we could look at the spirit of first industrial and rephrase that as original modern. And that the values of originality and modernity could be synonymous with this place in the 21st century the same way that they were in the 19th. You could attempt to take an original and contemporary approach to the issues of the city.
What is for me the nightmare of branding is that you always have a sense that in 100,000 cities similar to Manchester, people are having equal ideas and working on the same program.
Well, they have to, but they have to. The answer
for instance, the city of Rotterdam, you could kind of it's totally interchangeable, also in terms of rhetoric, also in terms
Yes,
of
could be.
kind of ambition.
But Ren, what you have to do is you have to find something, as whether it's a city or an organization or an individual, you have to find something which is to some extent true to them, and something which the people there can either do or aspire to being able to do. I would say that Rotterdam's kind of position and approach to the world should be kind of different to what Manchester's would be. And if it isn't different, then it isn't correct. And, you know, I mean, all you can do, I mean, you know, in a situation like this, I'm not attempting to do this. I am attempting to give my point of view to some other people whose problem it is. And all I can actually do is give my point of view. There's nothing more or less than I can do than that. And it's not, in that sense, it's not actually my problem. You know, the problem of cities is the problem of the city. There's the problem of the people there. You can give some advice. You can give an opinion. You can say, from my point of view, this is my take on this. And it's down to them how they respond to that, and it's down to them how they go about, you know, attempting it.
But isn't that the kind of both the strength and the weakness of the consultant?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, but Rem, what I'm doing is I am giving my opinion to people who ask, but I am not going out in the world offering it. People have said, would you like to do this for other places? And my answer has been, well, not really, no. You know, Manchester's my home. They've asked me for my opinion. I've tried to give my opinion in a way that meant something to them. I mean, Hans knows that we already do have one positive outcome from this interaction, which is the festival that they're planning. But I mean, I do not wish to go around the world trying to be a sort of, you know, kind of
to be Richard Florida.
No. Richard Florida is Richard Florida.
Because you said, you know, all of those things on that previous CV, most of them you don't do them anymore. So I think what is interesting is what you do now, and you've obviously started to venture into exhibitions. At the same time, you still do sometimes kind of have contact situations with corporate clients.
Yeah.
But then in a sort of a very different sort of negotiation. You told me the other day this strange story of the sports shoe company and the sort of whole letter.
Which one?
I think it was Adidas or Nike, or I don't remember.
Yeah, the Adidas.
And maybe that could be my last question, that you could sort of tell us this story, because I think it somehow makes maybe clearer this sort of negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, strangely, at the age of 50, I am kind of interested in doing things that I want to do. You know, the work I did at the beginning that people are kind of, you know, fondly remember me for was based on me doing what I wanted to do. I did record covers that I wanted, you know, and nobody stopped me. So I just made the record covers that I would have wanted for myself. And the real job of the graphic designer, this 4 others, 2 others, was something that I spent all the 90s struggling with and realized that I didn't really want. I mean, I learned in the end how to do it, but I didn't really want to do it. So these days I try to stick to doing things I want to do. You know, I also do have to pay the rent. So occasionally I do something that I, you know, would rather not do, but, you know, I do have to exist. But increasingly the commissioned work is more on my terms. So that's the one luxury that I have, is that people do come to me as me rather than just coming to me as a commercial artist. Adidas asked me if I would do a trainer for some anniversary kind of concept, anniversary marketing campaign for Adidas. And I said, thank you very much for asking. I mean, it's always flattering when people ask you to do anything. Even if you don't want to do it, it's still nice that they ask. And I said, thank you for asking me, but I don't want to do it. And they were surprised, and they said, why? And I said, well, because I don't believe in it. I mean, you don't really want me to do one, and I don't want to do it. This is just another sort of gratuitous partnership liaison between somebody who has, you know, a kind of a cult name and a corporation who have no credibility but a lot of money. So these liaisons are meaningless. They're a press release. And, you need some status, and, people like me need some money. So there's a sort of marriage of convenience. And, it's not plausible anymore. I don't believe in these things, and I don't believe that, kids out there believe in it either. So thank you, but no. So they were a bit surprised, and they said, but you can do what you want. And I said, I don't think you're listening. I don't want to do it. And I said, there's only one interesting thing. They invited me to Germany to the Adidas factory, which was kind of interesting. I said, there's only one interesting thing. And they sort of sat on the edge of their seats and said, what is that? And I said, the brief you have given me is interesting. The brief basically exposes the gratuitous nature of the project. I said, that's interesting. I said, I wouldn't mind giving the brief to 5,000 people. And they said, how do you mean? I said, well, actually, print the brief and share the brief. That, I think, is important. That's something worth doing. That's, to bring some transparency to this process is a gesture worth making. And to my great surprise, they said, okay, we'll do it. I said, you make me a pair of plain white shoes that I would wear and print the brief. And they said, yeah, we'll do it. The scary thing is how awful the kind of corporate monster is. It's like, Forbidden Planet. There's a monster in Forbidden Planet, which is actually the angst of all the people. And that's unfortunately how corporations are now. They kind of, no matter, even if you kind of criticize them, they take that criticism into themselves and become sort of almost bigger through it. But, I think that, I would like to hope that somebody got some kind of clarity from my version of the Adidas project.
Many thanks, Peter Saville. Thank you very much.
Thanks,